Hey everybody, I'm Shinobi with Bitcoin Magazine, joined by Antoine Poinsot. I hope I didn't butcher that too badly.
Poinsot, yeah,
Poinsot from Chain Code Labs,
yeah.
Bitcoin core contributor. And we're here to talk a little bit today about the Great Consensus Cleanup. So, a proposal Antoine has put forward to address a couple of long-standing bugs in the Bitcoin protocol. Some of them arguably are not that big of a deal. Others are serious security threats to the entire network. So I guess, Antoine, if you want to start off and just kind of walk people through the problems.
Yeah, so there is three issues that are fixed by my proposal, two of which I would consider vulnerabilities, and two of which I would consider weaknesses, which I think are worth fixing at the same time as the actual vulnerabilities. The first vulnerability is Timewarp. Timewarp allows an attacker exploited to its full potential, not in all cases, but exploited to its full potential allows an attacker to basically bring down the network in 38 days. It works by messing with the timestamps of blocks and massively increasing the block rate. It's only a concern for 51% attackers, which arguably is already an assumption that Bitcoin makes. But the assumption made by Bitcoin is that a 51% attacker can censor transaction for as long as they're able to keep expensing this energy to keep censoring, and they have to maintain this cost and maintain this 51% advantage. This changes the threat model. The existence of this bug changes the threat model of you can censor some transactions or all transactions for as long as you can maintain this advantage to in 38 days you can bring down the network. I think it's more of a concern, however, because bringing down the network is absolutely not in the interest of existing miners. It might be a concern for an externally motivated attacker. I think, however, it's more of a concern for perverse incentives within the network, especially with the current mining centralization. I think it's plausible for miners to coordinate and exploit time warp to some extent. For instance, to increase the block rates by 2x. So you have one block every 5 minutes. This means twice as much resource usage for all nodes on the network that arguably did not sign up for that. And also it means that they are able to effectively steal the block subsidy from the future miners. And so it might be in the incentive of short-sighted miners because they steal the subsidy, and short-sighted users because they have twice as much block space, which all other things equal is our fees. The second issue that I'm proposing to fix in my bit is expensive blocks, which is blocks that are very slow to validate, the details of which I'm trying to keep private. Most of the issues are fairly well-known among the developers, the protocol developers, but still giving away all the details and all my scripts to create those blocks.
So yeah, if you released the scripts you used to verify this, then anybody out there could craft these transactions and attack the network.
Yes, with access to some hash rate.
And that might even you might even create an incentive for miners to do this to gain an advantage against other miners and force them to mine empty blocks until they finish validation.
Exactly. Well, not only mine empty blocks. The issue here is that if you're a miner, what you really want to know is whether to start mining on top of a new block. So you want to know whether the block is valid or not. It might not be valid, so you don't want to be mining an empty block on top of it. So you're effectively wasting your hash rate.
So there's two ways a miner could to turn that to their advantage, either forcing another miner to lose revenue mining empty blocks, or just actively wasting their work on an invalid block.
Yeah, I think it's not a concern of empty blocks. It's just you're forcing another miner to be mining on a stale tip, which is by all likelihood, they're wasting all the hash rates during the time of validation. Or these miners might start SPV mining, which is mining only on the header and trusting the proof of work and not actually validating the transaction. But if they do that, they might be incentivized to have some agreement with other miners. So which is, again, more centralization pressure. So yeah, expensive blocks are an issue for accessibility to the network, but more importantly for perverse mining incentives. The third, maybe to give some numbers, the worst block, so I tried to create the worst block possible today under current consensus rules. The worst I could come up with took an hour and a half to validate on a Raspberry Pi and a couple minutes on high-end hardware. Moving on to the next issue. This is Merkle tree malleability, 64-byte transaction in the way how the Merkle tree in the blocks, in the Bitcoin blocks is constructed. 64-byte transaction, which would be a leaf in the Merkle tree, can be reinterpreted as an inner node of the tree. So it causes an issue going in both directions. You could fake a whole row of inner nodes in a block to be 64-byte transactions, and which is an invalid block. You can turn valid blocks into an invalid blocks with the same block hash. Or you can turn a 64-byte transaction and fake it as if it was an inner node that is committing to an arbitrarily sized transaction. That would be that you can create a Merkle proof for. So you can create a Merkle proof for a transaction that is not in the blockchain, but it would be, so it would be a fake SPV proof. And this can be mitigated because in Bitcoin, all in the Merkle tree constructions, all transactions in the block have the same depth in the tree. And when you're trying to exploit this, you actually increase the depth because you take one leaf and make a fake commitment to a transaction that is not. So it's the depth n+1.
So if they see a proof of any real transaction in the block, they'll see like this real one is a different depth than the fake one. Like it doesn't match how it's supposed to look in a block.
And so the usual way would be to ask for an SPV proof of the Coinbase transaction so that you know that the Coinbase transaction is at this depth. And if the SPV proof you get is at a higher depth, someone is trying to attack you. So it's a fairly simple mitigation, but people need to actually know about it. And it was like it's fairly well known among protocol developers, but not necessarily among application developers. So it was, it was brought to my attention that some application did not actually check for it. And also it might be too expensive to do in some constrained environments. For instance, people nowadays are talking about crazy stuff with scripts, but some people are talking about checking Merkle proofs in scripts. Well, if you want to check a Merkle proof transaction, that would be very annoying to have to check also the Coinbase transaction and check that both are actually at the same depth.
Yeah, you're adding a big inefficiency to the witness data that you need. To the script itself, a lot of complexity. So more complexity, potentially not possible at all in some constrained environment, and just a foot gun for application developers to have to know and act against it. This is mitigated, this is fixed by invalidating 64-byte transactions, which is not ideal, but also I think when you weigh the pros and cons is the least bad option. So we can debate it, but
I think so at this point of the discussion. And then the last issue that I propose to mitigate is the one related to duplicate transactions. So very early on in Bitcoin, it was possible to have two exactly same transaction, two transactions with the very same TXID.
Starting from the Coinbase.
Yeah, because the Coinbase commits to a previous TXID, which is 0000. So if you have exactly two same Coinbase that's based to the same amount to the same script pub key, they are going to have the same TXID, which is a massive issue because we refer to transaction by their TXID, and that's how we look up UTXOs and kind of thing. So this was fixed in I think 2018 or 2012 through BIP30, which introduces validation for full nodes for any new blocks that you receive. You go through all the transactions in the block and you look up if there is no single UTXO in your UTXO set with the same TXID. This is annoying, and we could just make transaction unique directly. So one way this was proposed and activated in Bitcoin was BIP34, which mandated that Coinbase transactions commit to their block height in the script sig. However, by the time that BIP34 was activated around block height 200,000 something, miners had been using the script sig already. And as an extra nonce, so you had a bunch of garbage in the script sig. It turns out between block 0 and block 200,000, there's a bunch of Coinbases with garbage in the script sig, so that deserializes to a valid BIP34 block height that is in the future. The first one of them was around block height 400,000 something, and we just had to, it was noticed 2 weeks before the block height was reached. So at this point, you just had to pray that it was not different. Because at this, well, trying to explain it to people, having this block height from the future, let's say at block 100,000, I commit to block height 400,000. And then coming block height 400,000, there is an opportunity for a miner to create the very same transaction that was in block height 100,000. The next opportunity for this is going to be block 1,900,000, which is still far in the future, but it means that by this point we have to resume BIP30 validation in Bitcoin Core and in other clients. That's an issue because it's unnecessarily expensive to do. It's unnecessary computation that we'd rather not do, and also it's just, for some clients, it's just not possible to do at all. For UTXO, for instance, it's not possible to do, so it would make UTXO nodes not fully validate blocks anymore. So to mitigate this, I propose to commit to the block height in the Coinbase and lock time field.
Well, I think for starters, I want to talk a little bit about the Timewarp attack, because I think there are kind of two factors you touched on that make that a very serious risk for the network. In the case of like miners having an incentive to kind of collude a little bit to speed up block production, I am very concerned about that possibility when you look at all of the American mining companies, like the publicly traded companies. None of them are profitable. Like they're losing tens of millions of dollars every quarter. They're all just financing those operations on loans and debt. And the possibility of the Timewarp attack, offers them a road if they were to collude to increase their revenue versus their share of the hash rate under honest rules. And, the fact that they're hemorrhaging money and completely unprofitable, that is a massive incentive for all those companies to actually consider something like that.
I agree. I mean, have you seen this recent paper that was published by some people about how to accumulate Bitcoins for the government at no cost for the government? Basically what they propose is just to create a new Bitcoin. Just create mine a new Genesis block, port the UTXO said to this new chain and call it Bitcoin. At this point, they could just propose, well, all miners in America just exploit Timewarp, and you give 50% of the stolen subsidy to the government. Going through your line of reasoning, that sounds plausible.
And even, speaking of governments kind of inserting themselves into this situation, like a 51% attack now, mandated by government regulations or legislation, like all they can do is like you said, censor a transaction. But like this would be a road where they could kill the entire network. And that really concerns me right now. I feel like a lot of Bitcoiners have gotten very apathetic and kind of disconnected from those types of adversarial concerns when it comes to government. And everyone has decided Trump said Bitcoin is good and he's president now, so we have nothing to worry about anymore. Well, even assuming that everyone is correct about that, I don't personally agree with that. He's not going to be president forever. Like at the end of this 4-year term, somebody else is going to take that office, and who knows what their attitude towards Bitcoin is going to be. If America remains a dominant, share of the hash rate, this is a very possible way that the U.S. government could attack and kill Bitcoin.
I think going after the choke points through KYC and everything is probably a lower hanging fruit for them than trying to, like, do you think that they would mandate that these miners in America not include, for instance, OFAC transactions? Or do you think they would mandate actually orphan any block, like do not build on any chain that contains OFAC transactions? Like, do you think they would mandate an actual 51% attack?
If there was a majority of hash rate in the US, I absolutely do. I feel like America would see that as a way to leverage control over something that right now represents something they can't control.
Power projection, right?
Please do not go there, Antoine. but yeah, it's like this attack, represents a complete change in the risk that a malicious mining majority represents to the network. And even I believe it was back in 2017, I think this also represents a very bad route that developers could consider abusing someday to do something they view as an upgrade. Mark Friedenbach, formerly of Blockstream, proposed doing that explicitly and using the timestamp or the Timewarp attack essentially as a indirect way of effectively increasing the block size just through shortening the interval between blocks. And, again, the same way we don't know who's going to be president in 4 years, like we don't know who is still going to actively be contributing to core 10 years from now, what their motivations or assessment of different risk profiles or trade-offs are going to be.
Yeah, let's say, if I want to put it in a populist rhetoric, I would say, if you're a node runner and you care about the resource constraint that you impose on miners, such as you may only mine up to about 2 megabytes block per 10 minutes, and I'm restricting this block size for my interest, well, you should probably fix Timewarp. It's in your interest as a node runner because it might be exploited, and it might blow up the effective block size, right?
Mm-hmm. It's that kind of leans, the same way into the issue of very expensive to validate blocks, opening like the same kind of like change in terms of threat models that we have to consider. Just the ability to create this block arbitrarily, it's an hour to validate on a Raspberry Pi, like this has implications through the whole stack. Like that kind of cost very well could, in the fringes have security implications for users of layer twos, like a Lightning node or anything that has to monitor the chain.
You'll know it's going to crash.
Yeah. And that could very much put a user's funds at risk if this happens in the wrong situation or the wrong time for them. And all the way up to this is something even a more resourceful machine, just taking a few minutes, that's enough to potentially impact miners' revenue. And it's just like the whole way through the stack, it presents a different degree of risk to different classes of users depending on the context you're looking at it in.
Yeah, definitely. You, at least back when I was familiar with one of the implementation of Lightning, if we cannot reach Bitcoin D for more than 1 minute or a few minutes, whatever, you just stop the software because you have no way to reach the Bitcoin network. So that's what I meant when I said it would crash. And yeah, a block that is making your Raspberry Pi grind for more than a hour, it clogs Bitcoin D. Like the process is not going to reply for, it takes a mutex that we have internally. It's just the software is not going to be responsive for more than an hour on your Raspberry Pi. And yeah, for miners, I started looking at the economical incentive of actually performing the attack, taking into account the preparation cost, because it doesn't come for free for an attacker as well. But it's not clear. It depends on the block subsidy, because for the preparation, you give up on fees to sneak in some preparation transactions that are hard to validate in preparation for your very bad block. But yeah, even having to go into reasoning and making some assumption in your economical model, we shouldn't be reasoning, but like we have enough to worry about miners' incentive already. We shouldn't try to factor that in.
We're just leaving another variable to complicate the whole space that has to be analyzed.
Yeah, it's very close to selfish mining, essentially, in terms of the skewness of incentives.
And I know we talked a little bit about some of these issues, I think a week ago now. As far as like Merkle-proof validation, there are a lot of potential. I know some people will get mad that I use this phrase, but layer twos, like Liquid or Rootstock or other systems that actually make use of Merkle proofs in different way just to maintain the security of that secondary system, and how that kind of presents engineering complexity around building systems like that.
Yeah, Liquid, if you're going to send coins to the Liquid sidechain, how do they call them again? Watchers, whatever.
The Watchmen.
Watchmen are going to check that you need to provide a Merkle proof that you actually sent these coins to the chain, and well, this Merkle proof could be faked. The Watchmen in Liquid I checked actually require check the depth of the Merkle proof against the depth of the Coinbase in the block for which it's given. But yeah, it has implication. When we say SPV, people often directly think about SPV wallet that have seen less usage than they once had. There's still some usage, like the Electrum wallet that is still very popular, does SPV proof of transactions. Although most people nowadays use Electrum with a trusted backend. There is sidechains and there is whatever protocol people might be using Merkle proofs for, and shouldn't have to think about this weird foot gun in the Merkle tree.
And I'm even aware of some systems built on networks like Ethereum that are actually SPV validating some aspects of Bitcoin state and reacting based on that. I know that is outside of
that would be very interesting to check out the smart contract, because they cannot update the smart contract if they didn't do the Coinbase check. It takes maybe something I didn't mention. The attack does not come for free. You need to brute force between 65 and 70 bits.
It's what was it, like a couple $1 million or something?
Yeah, but it was a couple $1 million as estimated by Sergio in 2017 with ASIC from back in the day. Nowadays, the ASIC, the dollar per hash is much lower. So the attack is more accessible, and it's also it needs to be compared to just mining an invalid block and providing an SPV proof for this invalid block. Today, the proof of work is something like, well, last year it was something like 80 bits of work. So this is much cheaper than a proof of work. And with a fake block, you can only fake a single confirmation. With this bug, you can fake an arbitrary number of confirmation.
Yeah, so it's not even a situation of you have to convince somebody to accept the transaction in one block, or they'll see like,
Yeah.
it'll just keep building and their wallet will show like this is still valid.
And also another, sometimes people confuse this because it requires 64-byte transactions. 64-byte transactions are just to make the link to the Merkle tree, but you can fake arbitrarily sized transactions.
Yeah, and so you've put together the bit that has no number yet to kind of address and fix all of these in a soft fork. And I know at least from my perception, most of the people at Chain Code also see this as kind of like the next major step or priority we should have as far as the consensus level goes.
I don't know. I don't really know, but well, I know some people working on core think it's pretty good idea to do. At Chain Code, let me think.
Well, it's just
so.
my perception kind of from the
Yeah, I think your perception is wrong. I don't think I had no explicit buy-in as we should do this as the next soft fork. We can do multiple soft fork in parallel as well. But even as we should do it, I had many buy-ins such as, oh, this is great research in just thinking about what's the actual worst case in terms of validation time for a block. That's very good to know. Putting together mitigations for Timewarp is good to have, so we can pick it up in case of emergency, even if I do not believe it's possible.
At least get it to the point where all you'd have to do is rebase it to the current version and not build everything from scratch.
Yeah, but I find this, so one thing historically that was said is Timewarp is less of a concern because it's pretty obvious on chain and we would react. Like what? In 38 days, who is we? Who is we? What individual is going to do what action exactly? Because I do not believe we can just coordinate the whole Bitcoin industry in 30 days to decide the validity of blocks.
I mean, realistically, like you don't have 38 days. You have a week or two before the difficulty really starts ratcheting down.
Yeah, let's say 4 weeks. At 4 weeks, 28 days at this point, it's almost over. And yeah, I just think it's very unrealistic to expect that amount of coordination from people. If it was possible to coordinate people in this scale, we probably wouldn't need such a system.
There'd be a lot less frustration with Bitcoin Core, I think. But yeah, it's, because the Timewarp, especially like that's been publicly known almost the entire time I've been in this space.
2011.
Yeah, or no, actually longer than I've been in this space. And it's always, from my perspective, just every couple years someone's brought it up and gone like we should look at this and actually address it, and then nobody responds and it goes back off into the background. But this is really a massive existential risk. And like we are at the point, in my opinion, as far as integration into the mainstream financial system, attention from politicians, like the professional scale that mining has reached in terms of like how high the bar is now to meaningfully like start an operation as a miner. Like this isn't like an intellectual curiosity anymore. This is a risk that very realistically could kill Bitcoin, and if not kill, like severely damage.
Yeah, severely damage, I think, because at this point, imagine it's exploited to its full potential. Some people would coordinate to invalidate this chain and end up on another chain. Probably people would just take the opportunity to sneak more changes in, and maybe there would be multiple chains. It's unclear what would happen. Severely harming the trust in the network. At what block exactly do we fork off?
I mean, I guarantee you, if this actually manifested in the real world, you'd have people calling for a proof of work change on top of like just addressing the time warp vulnerability itself.
Yeah, that would be messy, which is exactly what we don't want about Bitcoin.
But yeah, it just goes to show, a lot of the talks, a lot of the conversation here, at least today, has been focused on like how much work and issues there are to deal with, like beyond like let's add a new soft fork to create new functionality for Bitcoin. Like there really is kind of this mountain of engineering work and issues to figure out that doesn't circulate in the Twitter spotlight the way like what covenant are we adding?
Yeah, I see so many people on Twitter proudly, even big accounts, proudly boasting about how they didn't update their nodes in 5 versions.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, you are now vulnerable
able to CVX, CVY, CVZ, and we just published them on the website. Truth is, I'm intimately convinced that we have not seen anything yet. Nobody cares about attacking Bitcoin at the moment. It's like we released TVs, and you had 20% of the network that was still not upgraded. Nobody cared to attack them, to take down the nodes. I released this chain split bug for BTCD. It was fully accessible and completely damaging and zero cost to exploit. Nobody exploited it, and 1 year later, you still have half of the BTC nodes on the network still running vulnerable versions.
I can only hope that that is essentially just nodes that are economically irrelevant, like just the user who spun up a node and
forgot about it. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But for the percentage of Bitcoin Core nodes that are still vulnerable to published security advisories, there's just so many of them that some of them must be somehow economically relevant. Yeah. Upgrade your nodes.
Let's just hope that the conversation around your proposal actually goes somewhere, regardless of what happens with covenants or not.
Yeah.
Or how you relatively like think we should act first or what we should do first. Like these are very serious issues that we can't just ignore and pretend aren't a problem.
Yeah, we have mechanisms to not have to choose which one needs to go first or not. So I think we should treat them separately and treat them in isolation. I'm trying to also, to be honest, it's going to be kind of a political game of trying to get to activate the soft fork. You need to get users to upgrade to new consensus rules. So there's no get away. But I'm trying to just be, I don't know, honest. I chime in on covenant issues, sometimes with differing opinion from most of the people working on this topic that might harm, like, then maybe they're getting some horse trading of like, I'm nice to your proposal and nice to my proposal. I'm just hoping, like, I'm optimistic actually that we can just be adults and treat them in isolation, treat arguments. I think there's arguments there might be arguments against some parts of my proposal. It's been discussed a lot for the past year. We've been through a lot of the arguments on delving Bitcoin already, but I'm still open to if users at large say, for instance, take one of them that is part of the weaknesses more than the vulnerability. Like, we're not going to invalidate 64 bytes. We're not going to run such software. At some point, I'm going to bend, right? That's not the case now. I think this is the least bad option, and that's why I propose the BIP. To be clear with users as well, I'm not taking lightly to propose a change to Bitcoin. It's just like not one more BIP. It's something that was discussed for 6 years. The first version of Great Consensus Cleanup was published by Matt Corallo in January 2019. I've been researching it for a year and a half, discussed with many people. The proposal itself had input from a lot of people testing, and that's why we have this BIP now. It still does not have a number. There is way to go. It's not going to propose activation client tomorrow, but I'm hoping to make progress with it.
Well, I hope you do because there, there are too many problems Bitcoiners are just ignoring and pretending aren't real. Like we need to start solving some of them. All right, well, thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.